From KUNC and the NPR network, this is In the NOCO, a daily slice of Northern Colorado news and happenings. It's Tuesday, April 2nd. I'm Erin O'Toole. Most people would agree that the immigration system in the U.S. is broken. But how it's broken and how to fix it are the real debate. As this debate goes on, the stories of people caught in a messy immigration web continue to rise. If I Could Stay is a documentary film that tells the story of two such people, Jeanette Vizguera and Ingrid Encalada Latorre, two undocumented mothers living in Colorado. When they faced deportation and being separated from their young children, they chose to take refuge in churches in Denver and Boulder. The documentary will have its Colorado premiere this Wednesday at CSU's ACT Human Rights Film Festival. Ahead of that, I sat down with one of those two mothers, Ingrid Latorre, and Florencia Krochik, one of the film's co-directors. I'd like to start with you, if I could, Florencia. There are so many ways to talk about the immigration system in the U.S. This film brings, I think, a very different perspective to the conversation by bringing us directly into the lives of Ingrid and Jeanette, who have taken sanctuary in a church. I'm wondering what made you and your co-director want to tell this particular story in this way?
Yeah, thanks so much for that question. You know, Theo and I are filmmakers who are very much invested in telling stories of immigrants, but not really politicizing when we are telling these types of stories. I myself come from an undocumented background, grew up with undocumented parents, and for me, what's important when we're telling these types of stories is to humanize what an immigrant is like. Immigrants are multifaceted. They're human, and I think what's really important is to humanize the issue by telling real, raw stories about the complexities of the immigrant experience in the U.S. rather than politicizing the issue as much as it is in the mainstream media nowadays. So our focus was to really just dig in and tell the stories of both Ingrid and Jeanette in a way that was multifaceted and complex, not just a caricature of what an immigrant seems to be today when it comes to the way they're portrayed.
And I know you spent a lot of time with Ingrid and Jeanette, and we really get to see firsthand not only their courage and their tenacity, but also kind of how they cope with the downtime and how they cope with the ongoing uncertainty in their lives because of their immigration status. There are also these beautiful, soft moments when they're with their children and a few happy moments when they get good news. What is it like for you as a documentary filmmaker to be there to capture these moments?
Honestly, it's an honor. As filmmakers, we're entering Ingrid's and Jeanette's lives, and to be able to be there at moments that are so pivotal in their lives and be able to witness them, it's truly an honor. And I don't want to speak for Ingrid and Jeanette, but I think that it's probably not easy to let someone come in and allow them to capture all these moments that are, for the most part, usually experienced in private. But Ingrid and Jeanette are so committed to change in the system that I think they understood the power of their stories, and they trusted us with it, and that resulted in being able to be there in pivotal moments in their life. And I think the feeling is just gratitude and gratefulness for having allowed us in that way.
Ingrid, let me bring you into the conversation here. You came to the United States from Peru when you were 17. Why did you want to come to the U.S.?
Well, it was a huge dream of mine to go to the U.S., since my aunt is already a U.S. citizen. I grew up with her in Peru, so she's like my mother. And, well, more than anything, it was because of the poverty that me and my family experienced.
Now, in the documentary, we learn you were charged with using false identity documents in order to work. which resulted in a deportation order. I'm wondering how you feel watching the news now, because we know thousands of people fleeing violence in Central and South America are here in Colorado. And we've reported on criminals in Denver who are selling fake documentation to immigrants like you who are desperate to find work. How do you feel about this? It sounds so similar to your own experience.
Pues ahorita realmente hay una gran crisis con inmigración porque realmente los políticos.
Well, there's really a huge crisis with immigration because the politicians really aren't doing their job, like the Democrats and Republicans should be doing. Because until now, it's been very difficult for them to make immigration reform. Or when someone arrives in the U.S., they could help them get documents and a social security number so they can work, so they aren't depending on the government or buying fake documents out in the streets like I did. The system really pushes you to do things you shouldn't. And while there are criminals everywhere, here in the U.S., in China, they'll always be around. We have to make sure we're educating ourselves in the community. There are various organizations that are constantly offering classes for the Latino community about how to get an ID number or a driver's license. But even then, it's not that easy because it takes time. And it's really very difficult because there are so many people coming to the U.S. from Central America and South America without legal status.
Well, Florencia, if I could bring us back to the need for reforming the immigration system, from your perspective as a filmmaker, do you see a path to meaningful change?
I think it's really hard to say, especially because we're living at a time when everything is so politicized and there's extreme viewpoints on both sides of these issues politically. So it's really difficult to see a path where change will happen soon with the U.S. political system being as polarized as it is. However, what I will say is that by telling stories like Ingrid's and Jeanette's, who are very much complex and in the gray and not in the extremes, I think that's when change can come, when folks start to understand that the complexities of this issue, because I think what is happening today is there's a stereotype of what a bad immigrant is. And we saw that very clearly at the State of the Union. But then there's also a stereotype of what a good immigrant is. And the reality is that both are stereotypes. Right. So for me, as a daughter of undocumented parents, that is my mission as someone who tells stories, is to continue to tell the stories in a layered way to inspire the change that is very much needed so that families like Ingrid's and Jeanette's can experience much needed relief.
If I Could Stay is one of the documentaries featured in Colorado State University's ACT Human Rights Film Festival and will premiere during the festival's opening night this Wednesday, April 3rd. You can find more information at actfilmfest.org. We'll have a link in our show notes. Thank you to KUNC digital producer Natalie Skoland for providing the Spanish language translation. And that's it for us today here on In the NOCO. We'll be back tomorrow with more of what's happening in northern Colorado. Thanks so much for listening. We'll talk soon.